it's a hot day. I appreciate that you still come out to church even when it's warm. Probably really just want to be hanging out in someone's pool, but here you are, so thank you. Get my notes sorted out. I'm not going to assume that everybody here knows me because I don't know all of you, so you can't know me too. I'll just give you a brief background, quick synopsis of Fleur. Okay, so I've been coming here for about a year. Bruce is my husband, and we moved back to Gawler from interstate in December, not the one just gone, but the one before that. So we're really happy here in Gawler. What an awesome town. It's just amazing. We love it. And it's nice to be close to our family. I've got my mum up in Anguston in the Barossa, and then we each have siblings down kind of in the northeastern suburbs, Golden Grove kind of way. So I work a couple of days a week at the Australian Refugee Association, which is in Salisbury, and I'm their HR kind of person there. But I've also just started a counselling practice here in Gawler, like only a couple of weeks ago. So it's super fresh, very exciting. And you might kind of pick up as I'm talking, I can't separate myself from the counsellor. It's a big package that comes together. So be ready for that. Thanks, Judy. The other thing I wanted to tell you about just before I get into my message is I have an uncle who lives just on the River Murray, kind of back of Murray Bridge towards Mannum kind of direction. And when we came back to the state, we spent a bit of time visiting family and just reconnecting with people because living far away, we haven't had that opportunity. So we went to see him, and he's got a house which is built up on a hill with a deck so that you can overlook the river, which is just gorgeous. And while we were sitting out there, a speedboat came along, and you can hear speedboats a long time before you see them. So it kind of announced its arrival. We could see the boat coming. It went really quickly past that particular bend in the river, but after it was gone, the wake, the waves, the ripples, it lasts a long time. So that speedboat went past like that, but the effect of it lasted a very long time. I want you to keep that picture in your mind because we'll come back to that near the end. It seems like it's not at all related to what I'm talking about, but I promise it is. Okay, now I'm going to give this a go. New things. Oh, look at that. It worked. Thank you, Jesus. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about this woman, Clara Grant. Clara Grant is an English woman. She was an English woman. She's not alive anymore. She was the headmistress of the Devons Road Infant School, which is now called the Clara Grant Primary School. It was named in her honour. And she was a Christian woman living in East London in the suburb or borough of Bow. And she was struck by the poverty in her area, how children were affected by their parents not having enough money. They were overcrowded in those little 2 up, 2 down terrace houses, which are so common in that area. And she decided that she'd do something about it. Now, this quote of hers here, I actually can't see that screen, so I'll read it here. It so happens that I, a little schoolmum, have been responsible for the work throughout. I've been merely the agent through whom a splendid band of helpers, a sympathetic council, and a vast, almost worldwide army of friends and supporters have enabled to befriend one of the poorest districts in London. She was saying she is a very small part of a large work. And I'm going to tell you about that work. I'm going to tell you what she did and how I'm connected to that. Has anybody watched Call the Midwife? Yes? Bow is the suburb next to Poplar. Poplar is where Call the Midwife is filmed. So if you've seen that show, or if you've been to East London, you know what I'm talking about. It's narrow streets, terraced houses, little parks that are kind of dotted around, which are no bigger than a house block really, and lots of old, beautiful church buildings, many of which are now no longer churches. This area is quite close to the River Thames, and so traditionally working class people have lived there in Bow. It's never been a rich part of London, ever, and it still isn't now. It's generally thought to be in the top 10 poorest districts in the whole of the UK. That's a pretty interesting label to put onto a place. But because it's so overcrowded and at times it's been a very unsafe area, if a house fire took off in one end of a street, it could wipe out the entire street very quickly. There just wasn't same kind of safety measures when those places were built as what we have now. So when Clara Grant was around, 1 in 5 children in the East End didn't reach their first birthday. 1 in 5 didn't reach their first birthday. And most of those children lacked the basics like food and shoes and even things like clean running water because they didn't have the same systems as what we have now. Clara Grant, being an educator and working in a school, she saw something else that was lacking in these children's lives, and that was that they needed to be able to play. They needed to be able to play safely. And so she identified this need that's kind of wrapped up in what we would call poverty. And she decided to do something about that, which then got her the title. She was called the Bundle Woman of Bow. Okay. These pictures document the work that she started in 1907. So the top right-hand picture, children used to come on a Sunday morning. They would line up in the area down to, that's her street and that's her house where those bundles of baskets are. They would line up and wait their turn. They'd bring a farthing, which is not much money, a farthing. And they would walk away with a bundle. It was a piece of cloth or a piece of paper tied up with string, which held some things like, and you might find these things familiar if you've done anything with the Samaritan's Purse people. But it was something like a piece of bread, something to eat, a piece of soap, something for personal hygiene, a pencil or a piece of paper, something to help them learn, and a small handmade toy so that they had something to play with. So they would come, line up on a Sunday morning. Can you see down the bottom right-hand side there's like an archway? If a child could walk through the archway without bending down, they were allowed to get a bundle. Once they got too tall and they couldn't fit through the archway, they weren't eligible for a bundle anymore. Now, that sounds harsh, but when you look at how many children are there, they had to have some kind of criteria for who could and who couldn't get this. Usually they were around 12. when they hit that not being able to go through the archway. And then I just love that picture on the other side, those little girls, they're so excited to be receiving their gift. Now, Clara actually insisted that they pay for their bundle. And once again, that sounds strange to us because we think that must have stopped some families being able to access this. But I think it also had another purpose, and that was she wanted the children to be able to bring their bundle back if they weren't happy with what was in it. And if they paid for it, then they had every right to be able to do that. If they were just given it, then it was an act of charity and they had to just put up with what they were given. So she was kind of teaching them that they had some rights as well as some responsibilities by doing that. I don't think that every child from every family received a bundle every week. That would have been beyond the means of most families. But even if they could take it in turns or if they came every couple of weeks, it meant that these children received something that made them feel that they were worth it. Was worth this work. Now, during World War II, the entire area was completely bombed and the children were just left with having to play in the ruins of their homes. There was no plan to move them anywhere else while it was rebuilt or anything. So this became particularly important. And during that time, Clara's building was still a bit usable, if that's a term. And so she lobbied with the local council for them to build a permanent council building because as much as she loved having a front parlour full of handmade toys and bits of soap, she really felt that it was better if they could get an external place so that she could continue the work. Now, people donated these goods. She didn't buy them herself. The money that the children gave was used to buy more things and keep the work going. So after World War II, a dedicated building called the Fern Street Settlement Building was built, and on top of it there was an apartment block. It was renovated later on, probably in the 1970s, and a kitchen was added, some office space, and it's got a lovely community garden outside as well. This is what it looks like today. It's called the Fern Street Building because it's on Fern Street. That's pretty obvious. And right up until the 1970s, the bundles kept getting given out to children out of this space. Then in the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the Fern Street settlement became a space for elderly people where they could come for a hot lunch and to meet with other people. Because of the rising costs of heating their own homes, if they came here, then they were in a warm place, all together, get some socialisation. And just over 10 years ago, Bruce and I came in contact with this church, All Hallows Bow. The vicar there had just moved into that area. He felt specifically called to Bow because of the poverty and disenfranchisement of the people there. He was walking around, prayer walking the area one day, and he stopped outside of Fern Street and he thought this would be a fantastic space that our church could use to reach out to the people. This area has a large amount of Muslim immigrants in it at the moment, and so expecting Muslim people to enter a church is probably a bridge too far. But if you can work out of just a generic building, that's easier for them to access. And not long after he'd been prayer walking, stopped and prayed and asked God how they could partner with Fern Street, the board contacted him and said, "Welcome to the area. We're excited to have a new vicar here. Did you know that the vicar of your church automatically gets a seat on the board of the Fern Street settlement building?" And he said, "No, I did not know that, but that's great news." So that then formed a partnership between the church and the building and the work that was going on there. By this stage, it was no longer used as a senior citizens centre, and it was kind of just an empty place that wasn't being used as it should have been. Clara Grant, the lady who we saw originally, had attended All Hallows Bow. That was her church. And when it came near the end of her life, she set up this system that the vicar of the church would be involved in the work going forward. She was a bit of a visionary lady. She wasn't just interested in what was happening right now. She was looking forward. How can this continue when I'm not here? How can future generations be impacted? So All Hallows came into the space, and they now offer a lot of services out of this building. They've got legal advice. They've got help for immigrants who come from overseas. They've got children's activities, homework clubs, a food bank, community action projects, English as a second language classes for women, and other classes for Muslim women in the area, just to be able to assimilate into UK culture. So how do I know so much about this space and about Clara Grant? I know because I was there, and it's super exciting that I was there. In September 2022, I lived in Bow for 3 months in the vicarage with some other young people, not that I'm young, some much younger people than I, and the vicar and his family. I worked a few days a week in Fern Street, and I also worked in the church cafe and helped with the church services. They had some alpha groups that were running during the week, and a really incredible outreach to recovering addicts, which it was a church service that ran along AA principles. So at Fern Street, these ladies in the middle of the picture, they were all part of an English as a second language group, which I helped at. These women often come from countries overseas, places like Syria, Morocco, Bangladesh, India, and Eastern Europe, Ukrainian and Russian women, which is interesting having both of those groups represented in the same class. Their husbands come first. They get an apartment. Then they move over with the rest of the family. They might be in a 2-up, 2-down apartment with 3 other families. And because they can't speak English, they have really no life outside of their family. Their husbands are working often at night, sleeping during the day. All they can really do is take their children to school. Their children learn English, but they don't. So that was a really special class to be a part of. I hadn't had a lot of interaction with Muslim people before, so it was really good for me to learn from them. And when they found out I was from Australia, they said, "How did you learn English so quickly? You speak so well." And so then we were kind of like having a bit of a geography and a social lesson about Australia and what that means. And at the time I was living in New South Wales, and we had a banana and an avocado tree in our garden, which they thought was just unbelievable. So the other side, that picture there, that's me and some of the kids. We took them to see a play which they just wouldn't have access to a cultural experience like that outside of their connection with Fern Street. These children attend the Clara Grant School. These families attend Fern Street Settlement, which was started by Clara Grant in 1907. We're talking over 100 years ago. The work continues. And so for 3 months, I was really lucky to be a part of that. The picture on your right is inside All Hallows Church, and they really support the work at Fern Street. And then on the left, these are the new apartment blocks which have replaced the 2 up, 2 down, and they're just tall towers, square concrete blocks with a minute balcony. And so the kids still need somewhere to play. They still need to go to Fern Street and to get the help from there. Going back to our original speedboat picture, Clara Grant in 1907, the noise started. She drove her speedboat along through Bow, and here we are so many years later, and the wake is still continuing. New generations of children are benefiting from the work that she started so long ago. Her empathy has continued. I never met Clara Grant, never met her, but people talk about her as if she's just around the corner in that area. She is so well known. And the children, they know who she is, they learn about her at school, they feel a very special connection to her when they come to Fern Street. And they're such funny little lively kids. Honestly, other people's children are not my best thing, I've got to tell you. I love my own children, but kids ministry isn't something that I've ever felt called or connected to. But when I was here, it was just, it's really surprised me at how well we connected and how much I loved it. I think I've got one more slide. Yep. So that's the church and their cafe. So I just want to wrap this message up now by saying, you know, we're here in Gawler. We're not in Bow. We're not Clara Grant, but we are people here in our own context and in our own place. And there is something for this church to do here. Something that will leave an impact, that will make a difference. Something that for generations to come will still be going. A work can be started that can have a legacy. And I think that we're kind of in that spot where we're trying to work out what that is. Where is that? What is that? What place do we have in that? And I just want to encourage us all to keep pressing into that, to keep engaging in the discernment process and not to just give that away too quickly. Because when we find that thing, it's going to be amazing. Being on that speedboat, it's pretty scary and it's pretty fun. Let's all get on that together. Let's do that together. I just want to go back. Will this go back to the first slide? Oh, look at that. It's magical. Just wanted us to keep Clara Grant in mind while I close in prayer. If you'd like to bow your head. Thanks. Jesus, I thank you that you give us all adventures that we can be a part of. You have plans for us. You have things for us to do, things that are just for us. And not only do you have them, but you show them to us and you work with us as we're in that space. So I just pray that for each of us here, that you can keep revealing to us that ongoing process, that unfolding of what is next and what that will look like for us. Bless us as we do that searching. And then as we begin the work, we ask that you partner with us. Amen.